So tonight we're going to talk about good old Pontius Pilate, and then we're going to talk about peer pressure. So, once a spider built a beautiful web in an old house. He kept it clean and shiny so that the flies would come into it. The minute he got a customer, he would clean up on him so that the other flies would not get suspicious. Then one day, this fairly intelligent fly came buzzing by the clean spider web. Old Man Spider called out, "Come in and set." But the fairly intelligent fly said, "No, sir. I don't see other flies in your house, and I'm not going in alone." But presently he saw on the floor below a large crowd of flies dancing around on a piece of brown paper. He was delighted. He was not afraid if a lot of flies were doing it. So he came in for a landing. Just before he landed, a bee zoomed by saying, "Don't land there, stupid. That's fly paper." But the fairly intelligent fly shouted back, "Don't be silly. Those flies are dancing. There's a big crowd. Everyone's doing it. That many flies can't be wrong." Well, you know what happened? He died on the spot. Some of us want to be with the crowd so badly that we end up in a mess. So what does it profit a fly or a person if he escapes the web only to end up in the glue? So how many of you have ever fallen into the trap of peer pressure, either positive or negative?
As in, what do you mean?
As in, someone pressured you into doing something, you did it. Either a positive thing or a negative thing.
I can't remember. What about you?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah? What was it?
It doesn't have to be something bad.
No, I know, but it wasn't
What
important.
about you, Robin?
My best friend pressured me to go to youth for the first time. I had grown up in church,
Oh, yeah.
but I had never gone to youth because my church was small and didn't have youth. And so she pressured me to go to church.
Got pressured into eating a very hot pepper.
Okay.
You got pressured into track.
Yeah.
And has that been good or bad? Or was it bad?
What about you, sister?
I got pressured to go to D now.
What about you, Nathan?
And it can be bad things too. As long as you realize that it was a mistake.
Yeah, that pepper was a mistake.
Probably going into ministry. Like getting the push to go into ministry. Alright, in a little bit we'll look at kind of some examples of positive and negative peer pressure. So we are in week 2 of our series looking at people who played a role in the Passion story. Last week we looked at Judas and his betrayal of Jesus, and then related that to being betrayed in today's world and how to handle that, and the actions to take. So last week I told you the goal, my goal for this study. Does anyone remember what it is? What's my goal for this study?
Anything. Can you give me a hint?
I'll give you the first part and see if you can figure out the second part. Okay, I want you to see the Passion story as more than just Christ died and he rose from the dead 3 days later. I want you to see it as what?
Oh. I had a good one.
I'll take it.
Think about what the title is. I've titled the series.
Persons of passion.
Okay, go off of that. If I don't want y'all to just see.
You want to see more in depth.
No.
The passion of people.
So I don't want you to just see the Passion story as just Christ died, he rose from the dead. I want you to see it. I want you to see the different people who made up the different events that are part of the Passion story. So how would you define peer pressure? How would you define peer pressure?
Being almost forced into doing something or being pushed into doing something that you didn't think you would do.
Okay. Brittany, what would you say peer pressure is?
When a whole group of people, okay, are like ganging up on this one person. They're not like bullying, but they're like, hey, why won't you come do it? Like, she's doing it, what's wrong? Are you scared? Are you scary cat? And then you feel like you have to because you don't want to be a scaredy cat.
Okay.
That's a bad thing.
Good. The dictionary definition of peer pressure is influence from members of one's peer group. Influence from members of one's peer group. So now we're going to look at we'll look at who Pilate is or was. He's not alive still. Then we'll look at the biblical account of Pilate's role. Why did Jesus go to Pilate? Based upon after we learned who Pilate was, the accusation, the question, the decision, and then we'll look at how to deal with peer pressure. So, do you know anything about Pilate?
No.
Pilot.
He was a pilot.
He was not a pilot. They didn't have airplanes. How can you be a pilot?
He should be a pilot of
Pilot of the land.
pilot of a boat.
So nothing.
Nothing.
Okay. Well, he was the 5th Roman agent of Judah.
And he was an Italian-born Roman citizen.
He was.
And a military personnel before appointment.
And
not
so
popular.
the Roman government was over the Jewish people. And so what he was kind of a governor-mayor combination type deal.
Arnold Schwarzenegger was a governor.
But he was also, he's like a judge, governor, mayor type person. Because he had the power of a judge. So he had absolute authority over the Roman citizens of the province. And he was responsible to the Roman governor who lived in Syria. So he was, I guess, more of a mayor, a representative of the Roman government, but also played the role of a judge. So he was an Italian-born Roman citizen whose family was extremely wealthy. He was in the military before he was appointed to his position. He governed the areas of Judea, Samaria, and the areas south as far as the Dead Sea. The thing was, because the Jews didn't really like any of the Romans, so he wasn't popular with the Jews. But the reason the Jews didn't like him so much is because he took funds from the temple treasury, so the money that people had given to the temple to God, their offering, and decided that he wanted to have a water system going in Jerusalem. So he steals the money from the temple to build this water supply to Jerusalem. And so then the Jewish people get mad and tried to kind of go after Pilate. And so Pilate's calls his soldiers in, they kill a bunch of Jewish people. The thing was, this action he decided to kind of take more of a violent approach. But in other actions, if the Jews would show oppression towards him, he would often back down and just kind of let them have their way, and was seen as very weak in that aspect. So now that we have some background, we'll look at the biblical account of the story of Pilate. The first thing is, why did Jesus go to Pilate? So the Jews had accused Jesus of making false accusations that he was the king of the Jews. And they wanted to be able to kill him. The thing was, because the Romans were in charge of the Jewish people, they had no power to just kill people at any time. They didn't have the right to just kill people without the approval of the Roman authorities. So the reason they came to Pilate is because he was a Roman and he could give them that authority they needed to kill Jesus. And so they wanted Pilate to pronounce the death sentence of Jesus. The first thing we're looking at is Mark 14, 64 and 65. This will just kind of be what they're kind of charging Jesus of, bringing him before Pilate. You have heard the blasphemy. What do you think? They all condemned him as worthy of death. Then some began to spit at him. They blindfolded him, struck him with their fist, and said, "Prophecy." And the guards took him and beat him. And then Mark 15:1 says, very, very early in the morning, the chief priests with the elders, the teachers of the law, and the whole Sanhedrin made their plans. So they bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. So I think a lot of times when movies, TV shows kind of picture the sign of Pilate, they kind of have Jesus kind of coming out onto the stage deal right away. Like the guards and stuff bring Jesus right out onto the stage deal. But what it would have been is kind of more back in the palace where Pilate and Jesus are kind of having more of a one-on-one conversation. And then it's kind of more he goes out in front of the crowd. Pilate goes out in front of the crowd. So the first thing we see is that the reason they had to bring Jesus there is so that they could get the Romans' approval to be able to kill Jesus. So then you got the accusation in verses 2 through 5. And so apparently they had told Pilate that Jesus was claimed to be king of the Jews. And so Pilate asked Jesus, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "You have said so," Jesus replied. The chief priests accused him of many things. So again, Pilate asked him, "Aren't you going to answer? See how many things they are accusing you of?" But Jesus still had no reply, and Pilate was amazed. So like I said, most likely they'd already kind of had this conversation with Pilate, or they told Pilate right beforehand that Jesus, this guy's claiming to be the king of the Jews. And so he kind of asked Jesus to kind of give him the chance to have his response. And Jesus kind of just gives him this blank answer of, "Oh, you have said so." So, I mean, that's kind of you claiming that I'm king of the Jews. And then it says that the chief priests accused him of many other things. Pretty much blasphemy, his teaching, doing these miracles, breaking the laws of the Sabbath, kind of the deal of his disciples ate the wheat when they were walking in the field and on the Sabbath. And so you have these different events that the chief priests kind of kept note of, and they're accusing Jesus of doing all these things. So then Pilate again asked him, "Aren't you going to answer? See how many things they're accusing you of?" But then Jesus still just stands there with no reply. And for Pilate, this really amazed him. He thought back to Isaiah 53:7 that kind of talks about that Jesus wouldn't, that the king wouldn't just, this guy's going to come, but he's not going to claim to be the king of just the Jews. He's going to claim to be the Son of God. And the thing of why, say, the claim of king of the Jew and why that was such a big deal, and the reason the accusation was brought about is it was seen, and the reason they really point that out to Pilate, that, hey, this guy says he's the king of the Jews, is because being a king of the Jew, saying that you're king of the Jews, was claiming to be, bringing treason against Caesar. That you were saying, "Oh, Caesar, I'm going to step on your toes. I'm the king of the Jews. You're just the Roman king. I'm going to come here and I'm going to destroy you." So this was punishment. This was a crime that could result in capital punishment. And so now that Pilate asked for the charges, he's going to kind of go back out and have this conversation with Barnabas and kind of with the people, and kind of have this second interaction with Jesus. And so we have the question. Look at verses 6 through 14. Now it was the custom at the festival to release a prisoner whom the people requested. A man called Barnabas was in prison with the incarnates who had committed murder in the uprising. The crowd came up and asked Pilate to do for them what he usually did. Do "Do you want me to release to you the King of the Jews?" asked Pilate, knowing it was out of self-interest that the chief priests had handed Jesus over to him. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have Pilate release Barnabas instead. "Why should I do that with the one you call the King of the Jews?" Pilate asked. "What should I do with the one you call King of the Jews?" Pilate asked. "Crucify him," they shouted. "Why? What crimes has he committed?" asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him." So what we see here is we have this guy named Barnabas. And he was in prison. Pretty much he had kind of ran protest, opposition of the Romans. And so they had thrown him in jail for that. It wasn't a major crime, but what it seemed as is that every time there was a this festival, Passover festival, that a prisoner got released. And so they choose Barnabas because his crimes weren't yet a murder anybody or anything. And so they kind of give him the choice, wait, I can either release to you Barnabas or I can release Jesus. So about this time, kind of a large crowd had gathered. And they kind of started asking Pilate, the chief priest, along with the people, to ask Pilate to do what he usually did. And they want Barnabas released to him. And so Pilate, kind of trying to give Jesus as many chances as he can, is kind of like, well, okay, you want me to release to you Barnabas, but what about this person, this man that's claiming to be the King of the Jews? But what the chief priests did is they knew that they could get the people uprised, and knowing that Caesar or Pilate kind of having that deal with the Jews start oppressing him, he just kind of backs up and he'll kind of be weak. You know, if they can get the crowd yelling at him, he'll do what they want to do, and he'll have Jesus crucified. And so they get the crowd to start yelling to release Barnabas and to crucify Jesus. After kind of he asks the crowd, now, what do you want me to do with this man that you call King of the Jews? And so probably the chief priest probably started yelling, crucify him, and the crowd kind of joined in this yelling. And so he's just Pilate's still at that point of trying to give Jesus another chance, not wanting kind of that blood of Jesus on his hands but and this just makes the crowd even shout louder, crucify him, crucify him. And so this story doesn't talk about it, but Pilate was so worried about kind of that he was going to be killing this righteous man. His wife had even told him, Matthew talks about that his wife had told him, hey, you're going to have to face this opportunity that someone's going to be brought before you, and it's going to be a righteous man. And if you put him to death, you're going to be committing a crime against this righteous man. And so Pilate does it. And what he does after he commits this crime against Jesus, he kind of holds this symbolic hand washing ceremony where he kind of puts his hands. People in movies really show you this, that he actually put his hands in the bowl and actually washed his hands. But pretty much it was kind of this deal that he put his hands over the water. And so what he was saying is, I'm innocent of this blood of this person. Yes, I said that they could kill him because I'm the Roman and they had to ask for my permissions, but I'm washing my hands clean of this blood. And so that goes along with this kind of this decision that Pilate made of saying, okay, wanting to satisfy the crowd, not wanting that the Jews to come after him, that weakness that he shows. He satisfied the crowd by releasing Barnabas to them and had Jesus flogged and handed over to them to be crucified. So you continue to see the weakness and also this peer pressure. Pilate just let's get to him and let's attack him. So he got to that point. It seems like that he was convinced that, okay, Jesus probably is guilty. He's trying to ask them, okay, what did he really do? Kind of, you've told me what he did. That's not anything to be put to death. That's not even a crime to be put in jail. From what I'm understanding from this, but what he did, even though he did think Jesus was guilty, he let the peer pressure force his decision. So Pilate is a good example of the unprincipled achiever who will satisfy what is right to accomplish his own selfish goals. Although he recognized Jesus' innocence and had authority to uphold justice and acquit Jesus, he gave in to the demands of the crowd rather than risk a personal setback in his career. This shows that both temptation and peer pressure can affect anyone at any age or background. So pretty much Pilate feared, first of all, the Jewish people were going to come after him, the chief priests were going to come at him, and then also that it'd be a pretty major setback in his career that this guy is claiming to be Caesar, and if he would have, or to be the king of the Jews, and so causing treason against Caesar, and so it'd be a setback of the Roman government saying, they could even fire him, they could put him to death for not following through with his job. So that brings us to how do we deal with peer pressure today? What are some things you all think you can do to stay away from negative peer pressure?
How do you stay away from it? Ignore it.
Okay.
That's what I always do.
You mean don't put yourself in that position in the first place if it's negative?
Yeah.
If it's a situation, I don't know, I'm gonna use the after school program type of answer, but like, if someone's gonna offer you like drugs or something, why are you even really in a position where they could? Like, if they actually have it in their hands and they're sitting there trying to like press to you, like, you should have this, it's great and stuff. Like, are you at a party?
I
or
would
are
have
you,
like took it and then like flushed it down the toilet.
No.
Like, yeah, I'll take it.
We get in trouble for taking it.
Yeah, I mean, you never know if you get in trouble for taking it, but I would think a lot of it's where you put yourself and just keeping yourself out of the situation.
Anything else?
That's you.
Yeah, so the 5 things that I came up with was first, the churchy answer. Having that relationship with God. We've kind of talked about this before and how you have this spot in your heart that only Christ can truly fill, and that people try to satisfy it with drugs and all these other things, sex, money, possessions. They try to fill this hole that only God can fill. And so having that relationship with God, He fills that spot, and you don't have that desire, that's needing that satisfaction from other things. If you do not have a true relationship with God, you have no true way of fighting peer pressure. So second is to be prepared. Think through situations ahead of time that you could face. Plan how you'd say no to someone. I even read something that talks about when it came to being prepared is practice saying no in the mirror. And it talked about that, people think that saying no should be easy. It's 2 letters. No matter if you're saying it in English or Spanish, you're still saying the same word. But the problem is the peer pressure and having other people try to push on you that's saying that no without kind of thinking about how you're going to say it. It's just kind of, you give into that peer pressure so easily because you're not prepared for that situation. You're not prepared to say no. So third is avoid it. Try to avoid bad peer pressure by spending time with friends who do not make you feel uncomfortable. 4 is to know the difference between good and bad peer pressure. So when y'all leave this evening, I'm going to give you this piece of paper. It's supposed to be a brochure, but it didn't print right for me to make it into a brochure. It's older. It's from 2007, but it relates still to today. It talks about kind of how talks about different kind of negative peer pressures and gives kind of how you will face them, how to avoid them, and also different types of positive peer pressure. So kind of the examples they give of some positive peer pressures: participating in sports, joining clubs, not being partying clubs like Spanish club, chess club, trying new foods, doing volunteer work, getting good grades, someone kind of pushing you into doing your homework and getting good grades and studying, showing respect, meeting new people, doing the right thing, being honest, and being responsible. Some negative peer pressures: writing graffiti, doing drugs, being racist or bullying, having sex outside of marriage, shoplifting, vandalizing property, drinking underage, cheating, or ditching school. So it's knowing the difference between, okay, is this a good peer pressure or is this a bad peer pressure? Number 5 is do the smart thing. Think about the consequences. Think about what's going to happen if you do this. Is it something that's against the law? Is it something that if you get caught, you're going to get in trouble for? And so know what the situation you're facing and how to deal with that. And looking at both sides, weighing the pros and the cons of what's going to happen, not putting yourselves in situations that you're going to face. They're going to face obstacles that are going to cause you to stumble and cause you to let peer pressure overtake you. Let's pray.
I have something I want to say really quick.
Okay, go ahead.
Something with that. Something with number 5 is like doing the smart thing. Is that even if you say no, if you're with people who are doing drugs or smoking or drinking or whatever, and you're underage, you're gonna get in trouble too. So it's not all about saying no. Like if you have the willpower to say no, that is fantastic. But if you say no, but you're sitting there with them while they're, I don't know, smoking pot or drinking or something, and they get caught, you're gonna get in trouble too. So keep that in mind with peer pressure. Is sometimes you lose friends over it, and you have to be prepared to make the smart choice and the choice that, if they're doing that, you probably don't want to be their friends anyway.
Right.
And also one more thing, is it a sin to be pressured? Even if it's negative, I'm curious what you say.
No.
Is it a sin?
Yes.
Is it a sin to be tempted?
Yes.
No. Jesus was tempted. It's not a sin.
I told you.
I just want to let you know, it's not a sin to be tempted. It's not a sin to be tempted to do it. It's not a sin to be pressured. It's a sin when you commit.
As I said, if you're the one doing the tempting or the
Yeah.
pressure,
But if someone asks you, hey, want to do drugs or whatever, hey, want to smoke pot or drink, like, you're not sinning by being asked for that. The time that you start sinning is if you do it.
any other questions, comments? All right, let's pray.